Hello, all you art bar lovers and poetry lovers out there. And right off the bat, let me give you a great, warm, welcoming National Poetry Month hug. This is a great time in Canada to be celebrating our art form. And I gotta say, Art Bar has been absolutely central to that celebration process for a long time now. This is the longest standing poetry series in Canada. And Art Bar, as I say, has been great to me in the past. I've been able to feature here several times. And I gotta say too, going back a few years ago, even the open mic at Art Bar was very important to me in helping me improve my page poetry, but certainly the performance end of my work as well. So a big shout out to the Art Bar poetry team, and a real thank you to them for allowing me to inaugurate with them National Poetry Month in Canada. I'll be performing work this evening from my new book of poetry, Sfumato. And I gotta say, this is a great day for me, the 6th of April, when you're watching this on your screens, because this is the day that my book is being released across the country. Already an Amazon bestseller, and already quite often on top of the hot new releases in Canada list. And I gotta say, as a Canadian poet, any day that you're out selling Margaret Atwood and Leonard Cohen is a pretty good day for sure. So it's been a good 2 months of pre-sales with the book, and it's wonderful to have it hit shelves across the country today. Sfumato, of course, refers to the painting technique invented by Leonardo da Vinci. Direct translation is smoke-like. I like to think that my poetry is a sfumato-like weave of literature and words. A recent review stated that my poetry is a sfumato-like haze between the head and the heart. Sfumato, of course, refers to the painting technique Leonardo da Vinci used to depict flesh and fabric. It's the interplay of light and shadow, most spectacularly represented on the cheeks of the Mona Lisa, his great masterpiece. So my poems this evening come from my new collection of poetry, Sfumato, and I'd like to get started. I do perform my poetry pretty well with no introduction to the poems. I simply move from poem to poem to poem, and I'll be wrapping up, in fact, with the title poem, Sfumato. So without any further ado, let's get going on some real poetry tonight. These poems of mine. These poems of mine refuse the anesthetic. No easy sleep for them, no quick way out, no eager anodyne to smooth their novocated lines into the pillow. Some poems, it seems, lounge so easily on the page, the boneless plasticity of cats in sunlight, confetti words lobbed in their parachutes to land with the exactitude of bearings. Well, not so the lines I write. They mostly writhe like moths too close to flame, twisting into shapes I scarcely recognize. Those wretched little monsters of love they've always wanted to be. This is a poem called The Window. This is the window. It is the only window in this room. It sees the clouds that are gray wolves unspeaking. It sees the door that I have burned with my eyes. It sees the chimney pots delivering thread to the stars. It sees the photograph open like a flower. It sees the pavement that bandages the molten yolk. It sees the money clip rest its head on the shoulder of promise. It sees the cedars that enfold the robin, that enfolds the egg. It sees the walls that will not yield to our fingertips. It sees the rooftops speak poetry to the rain. It sees the mirror that absorbs my beauty. It sees the leaves carried on the streamers of wind. It sees the clothes that require the blood from my body. The window sees what it sees with the steel eyes of a concentration camp. When I look out, I am there on the lawn, the merest perception of a window, trying to understand what it sees in me and why, oh why, it has left me here. This is a poem called Frank. A poem with a little bit of a twist, I might add. The dead mouse lay in the slipper with the sudsy peace of a prince luxuriating in a warm bath. One frail antenna of a leg flopped over the furry rim as though he just couldn't muster that one final heroic thrust to draw the whole self into his woolly casket before the siren call of his mortal coil. A nibbled bait trap suggested one last hors d'oeuvre, one last snort from the cocaine buffet had done its job. That sheep-lined hammock of slipper must have fluttered like a mirage before the pinky pinholes of his mousy eyes, the perfect spot to just lie down and let the leaking happen, the way it must be for trappers when the cold takes over and they prop against a tree, wondering why the dreaming won't stop. Well, it wasn't like that for Frank. My friend died lined up in a bank over on Finch, waiting to pay a hydro bill. His head hitting a table on the way down, no one to catch him, free fall into a pool of his own piss. I wish I'd been there for him. But I know life's not like that. You can't always save the sparrow. Seldom can you catch the falling. But it would have been, it would have been so wonderful, somehow right and proper for the world if I could have just held his head for a moment, told him how much he was loved, how much he mattered. I would have held him just like that, maybe offered him one of my slippers, saying, "Just climb inside, Frank. Everything's going to be okay, pal. Just climb inside and watch the stars. Everything is going to be just fine." Change of pace. This is a love poem called Deep with You. I want to go deep with you into the hollow of the flower where the bees wed, inside that thread between lyric and lip, where the word sleeps in its harness of flame, where the target waits like an accident, where the subway unfolds the dark silk of its journey like a hand tracing veins on a thigh. When I am deep with you, it is as if all the world is peeled like a peach ready for the cobbler. We see the spine of everything, the fibers of wind and rain, the narrative seared into bone, how poetry fastens to the river's tongue. Deep with you we bend, open-ended, vulnerable as a confession, the innermost of the innermost in that perfumed place where the bees go. Carrying on with the subject of love, this is a bit more of a light-hearted take on it. And I want to tell you right off the bat, this poem is not autobiographical, in case you're wondering. It's called Lust. I don't know much anymore about lust. except that it's one lonely syllable, and it rhymes with dust. In this harbor of blood, it's the stone in my throat, rides the wind of my bones on a rust-stained moat. It's the hawk on my fence post, that scoffing kink in my wire. In the gut of remorse, we shackle desire. You make a nest of your body and invite me inside, but it's not much of a wedding with only a bride. Clouds bruise the valleys. The heavens are reeling. Lust ruffles its feathers and stares at the ceiling. As I say, that is not autobiographical, but it is a take on human desire. This next poem is a poem that I do use in my one-man show, Infinite Sequels, but it hadn't been published until now, until very recently anyway. And this was also a pushcart nominated poem in the United States. This is a poem called Nails. There are the nails that bind our houses with their iron thread, that sew us together with their rusty rivers of trust behind our steel-gray walls. And there are the nails of the rail yards, those coolie spikes that divide and join with the vast disinterest of clouds soundlessly drifting over meadows before the prisms of our indecision. My mother's knitting needles were likewise a form of nails, flashing with a metallic insolence that could within themselves register within me such a confused and fierce love, and yet a certain bleeding. And later, of course, there are the caskets, where the nails are so final, solid, hammered endings driven home like rivets to still our longing. And I suppose there are also those classic nails of rain, and the nails we pound with our fists, and those nails we insert into parcel bombs, and the nails we pass through wrists. As a poet, I was not sent here to be lovely. Perhaps my role is just to proclaim. And maybe it's true that poems, they're just nails sometimes. We drive through truth to expose the stain. I wrote this next poem sitting on my front porch on a beautiful Sunday morning here in Stratford, Ontario, with the church bells tolling and the birds circling in the sky. And it was a time that I was very thankful for everything. And I wrote this one, which is called Beatitude on a Sunday Morning. Today I sing for the sun that descends in threads and teaches the robins to dance. I sing for stillness that kisses the polished boot of movement. I sing for the birds that marvel at me while I marvel back. I sing for the changing anemone of sky and the fronds of its tender fists, opening and closing above these holy meadows. I sing for the teachers of religious law whose finery hangs on the silvery pegs of forgiveness. I sing for the leaves that burst through the hands of trees. I sing, oh, I sing for the church of your makeup table, whose powders urge your beauty, whose brushes stake their claim. I sing for the neighbor's cat, coiled beside me now in his veil of silence, feigning hunger. I sing for the trees that tick like clocks and never fail the hour. I sing for the bricks of this house that drink into their starry bones the shards of sunlight that hold me in the glorious palm of their giving. I sing for my writing desk where occasionally by heaven's grace I am permitted to assemble words like these. I sing this for our joy. I sing this for our sorrow. And today I sing for the photographs that dismantle me so that I might emerge unbroken. This next poem I normally perform to the soundtrack of an 8mm projector, but experience has taught that sound effect doesn't translate well over Zoom or Facebook platforms, so I'm going to perform it a cappella for you tonight. This is a poem appropriately called Projectors. Skim the sheen of beach glass, sure and golden as this early morning, the women enter the sea. Insouciant as the gulls, pinned like mobiles against the dawn-fed clouds, their laughter spills across the white sand. From this dune, still packed hard and numbed with darkness, I watch my lady's joyful baptism. My wife and my daughter and my daughter's daughters enter the easy envelope of the morning sea, and I realize how the reels are numbered, how the film spews from the sighing canisters. I question and the years answer back. Their work is almost done. I suppose things have not gone badly. What I have broken, I have tried to mend. I have learned, loved, left words on a few pages. And now the women, woven into my life, 3 generations waving from the water's edge, while I hear only the projectors and their whirring, and I fit inside the frame, and I laugh, and I wave back. This is a real Stratford poem. I wrote this down by the what we call Lake Victoria, where the swans were laboring into a morning sky, and this poem occurred to me. It's a poem called The Prisons of Air. Swans labor their pinioned wings into the prisons of air, their bodies long like soft white arrows weighted to the silky smirk of the river's mirrored edge. And I can't help but think of Jimmy, likely picking up his coffee now on his way to the shop, wondering once again how it is that he never made it to the conservatory, never played Carnegie after all, how the rent is overdue, when he can see his kids again, what Connie is doing with her life now. I see him asking these things, maybe watching as I am now, the swans in their manacles, grazing the water with their wings, straining to penetrate the sky. Here are 9 aspects of nearly the same thing. 1. Shadows gnaw at the sunlight until neither exists. 2. We are smallest, she told me, when we lift our gaze to the Baroque ladders of the human heart. 3. The poem resides somewhere inside the blue pen resting on the white paper with my sleeping cat. 4. The puddle cannot erase the reflection of the child's face. 5. Why, oh why does the night come like this to press your kisses against my windows? 6. Again, the passing of the empty bus while I rake leaves. 7. We don't understand it yet, but someday we will. How the branches retain the wind, how the flesh cannot forget. 8. For 2 years the poet sought the correct words to depict the fish, and then the worm, and then he gave up. 9. I carry within me the dearest chains of my thresholds. Daily, I scale the rims to understand what awaits. 9 aspects of nearly the same thing. This next poem is called Metronome. It's written in 2-line sets to the lilt of a metronome. Once again, I lie wide-eyed observing clouds erase a gibbous moon, the only sound, the synced command of tides that rule the secret rivers of your body. In these linked and measured hours, in the barest branches of the night, where the gauges click, the metronome clamps its ticking jaws around the marrowed fuse of everything. It is always like this, the tolling bells that euthanize the greening valleys, the engines of the land tracing drug lines in the drying fields, robins dredging earthworms from the molten core. The metronome is working and it never stops. Big moon braying its clepsydra clock into the pounding pendulum of my blood. A man walking his dog by the river in the rain. They tell us that light is a victim of the dark, that the tides love nobody, that for every circumstance a psalm exists somewhere in those biblical bowels of forgiveness, that there is somehow more to this, more than meets the eye, more than just a man walking his dog by the river in the rain. It goes on like this, the totems we weave from a simple yard of silk, the significance of speaking, the input of the output, of standing in the space of others with the headlines blaring and the breathy mannequins propped behind their podiums, proclaiming reasons and the rationale and the how and the why and the meaning of air. This is how it all goes down all the time, just like this, everything being more than it is, nothing as barren or beautiful as bread and butter, nothing as effortless as a tear on a cheek, nothing unvarnished, nothing unstained, nothing of a simplicity irreducible as a man walking his dog by the river in the rain. This is a poem about my father, very much about my father. A poem called Fingerprints. My father was a handyman, one of those guys who could build a ladder to almost anywhere, diagnose an engine's illness through the unfailing stethoscope of intuition, produce from thin air the metallic snap of a measuring tape, to calculate within the most minute scintilla the depth of an amoeba's breathing. Well, I seem to have acquired none of these abilities. Nails deny my hammer. Wood and stone pursue their own vision of shape and purpose. My ladders seldom result in ascension. But I do have my father's screwdriver, an ancient Stanley, paint splattered and battle smoothed, the spent utility of a scalpel after surgery. No, its use does not imbue me with some instant cosmic power of a Mr. Fix-It. Still the angles do not conjoin. All night the faucet sneers its metronome drip. But in my hand, that screwdriver is a story told, a work of higher purpose, the fastening of light to dark, of fingerprints to soul, of moments to time passing, a genetic handoff of who I am and all the small and broken pieces of who we tried to be. Three more poems. This is one called Patterns. This is about aging, I think. I know something about that. Patterns. As the shadow of my life diminishes, the patterns become more visible. I rise into the morning, I sit in the garden, the ferns slouched after rain, and the patterns sting me. I see the design of my breathing, the twine of my blood forged in the scaffolds of wind. Everything a mosaic laced in its frame, clouds synced to the blue like waves stitched to a forgotten sea. The patterns of air and the patterns of light guide me through the drift of seasons. In the finest grains of sleep I fit inside the patterns of my dreaming like a note nested in its stave. And beneath my hands, the blue motif of your secret rivers is the pattern I have traced 1,000 times until our patterns become as one and we are holy once again before the gracious altar of the stars. I move in and out of spaces and the patterns seize me, the pattern of the moon in its translucent wash across the frayed meadows of a winter sky. The many patterns of silence that bind the sequence of my days into the moments that stoke within me the small dear fires that keep me whole. And I have to include one poem about the pandemic and these strange times in which we live. This one just won an honorable mention in a Ontario Poetry Society poetry contest, a piece called "The Thing Is." The thing is that no one really understands what the thing is. At least not well enough to deal with it before it becomes larger than the thing that preceded it, which is always smaller than the several things that follow because they always do. They follow, they come at you. The bats with their black knuckles, the flak that tears your wings, or maybe it's just a fold in the air that wilts so tenderly your breath while you shop or enjoy a round of cards with the boys, wondering all the while what the next thing is and when it's going to come. My last poem for you this evening is a poem. It's the title poem of my book, Sfumato, available now through Blue Moon Publishers. You can also order it through my website directly from Amazon or through Blue Moon, davidstonespoet.com. It's been a real pleasure to spend this evening with you. Again, hats off to Art Bar Poetry Series. This is the poem Sfumato from my book, Sfumato. We begin with the tear upon the cheek, a cathedral of water, living church of the chandelier, Through its windows, the hue of conch and summer phlox, cable knit into a vapor twine, the exactness of a human tear depicted on the canvas, so translucently perfect we want only to wipe it away. And then we move to the cheek and understand, perhaps for the first time, how the sun might dissect the rain, how flesh lives in the mouth of smoke, how a tear can rest upon the cheek like a glass cloud, yet be a prism for all of humankind. And now the full and easy take of her, the weight and droop of circumstance, the creases of despair, how the hijab's sunless frame holds her face toward our lens, unbending. This is what we take and what we take in. The portrait, the canvas, surrenders, smolder, absorbing shadow, how a tear gives back the light. Until, as with Da Vinci's dictum, we focus on the out of focus, there behind the woman, like a tear upon the sand, face down, that little heap of child, monochromatic driftwood, the focus on the out of focus, Da Vinci's dictum, until we see what we are meant to see, exactly as we are meant to see it. Thank you so much for your time tonight. Enjoy your evening. Big shout out again to Art Bar. The book is Sfumato. Buy it now. Thank you so much.